eyes tonight, we tumble gently into the flickering haze of gas lamps, tiptoe through soot-stained drawing rooms, and curl up in stiff bed sheets beside the restless ghosts of the Victorian era. You're not alone in your sleeplessness. Victorian insomniacs were tossing and turning long before you ever reached for melatonin. Instead of blue light filters and sleep apps, they reached for boiled lettuce leaves, mustard foot baths, and maybe a splash of laudanum. And believe it or not, you probably wouldn't have survived a single week in their night clothes, literally. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know where are you listening from and what time is it where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down a narrow cobbled alleyway, your boots damp with fog, the air thick with chimney soot, and the sharp tang of horse dung. It's London, 1875. Most windows glow with faint yellow light behind heavy lace curtains. A few windows remain dark, either blessed with sleep or crushed by fatigue. Inside, the problem is the same: no one can sleep, and no one knows quite why. Sleep is not something the Victorians take lightly. In fact, they blame nearly everything for its absence: overexcitement, underexcitement, the rise of the telegraph, or that shocking new novel by Wilkie Collins. Doctors speak ominously of nervous collapse and cerebral unrest, but no one really agrees on what's happening in your head after 10 p.m. Historians still argue whether these terms were veiled ways to describe depression, anxiety, or simply boredom laced with social repression. You remove your top hat and sink into a velvet parlor chair, its embroidered cushion lumpy and awkward. The gaslights hum faintly above, casting long shadows that jitter with every breeze. It's oddly beautiful and wildly unhelpful for sleep. Gaslight, while modern and exciting in its time, pumps out a constant stream of heat and fumes, drying the air and irritating your lungs. Cozy right. Victorians also believed poor air caused poor sleep, so they invented the night air debate. Should you open your windows and risk death from damp drafts, or close them and suffocate quietly in your own carbon dioxide? One 1870s pamphlet claimed that air thick with bedroom sins was more deadly than cholera. Another argued that open windows invited the cold breath of death. Choices, choices. As the night creeps on, you can hear the distant screech of metal as a streetcar turns its final corner, followed by a sudden, shrill whistle, perhaps from a factory down by the Thames. Victorian cities don't sleep. The Industrial Revolution is just hitting its stride, and the rhythm of city life now pulses 24 hours a day. No wonder your brain won't shut off. Your neighbor next door is pacing. The floorboards creak. You hear muffled sobs, perhaps from a child or a mother nursing a cough that never quite heals. You imagine what people did in these moments, wide awake, with no phone to scroll. They read, they embroidered, they wrote long letters they'd never send. Some just stared at the wall and hoped the darkness would eventually wear them down. One diary from 1859 describes the sensation of the soul wandering the halls of thought long past the body's permission. Another recounts a night spent arguing with shadows and counting each tick of the mantel clock as a judgment. Melodramatic, maybe. But when you can't sleep, every second feels like a tiny betrayal. You decide to make tea, but not just any tea. In the Victorian age, even your tea choices were moral decisions. Green tea, too foreign. Black tea, acceptable, but only if served with milk and modesty. Chamomile and valerian root were often prescribed for sleep, though few could agree on proper dosage. One remedy called for 10 dried rose petals and a shiver of nutmeg, while another simply said, drink until the vision's slow. Of course, you might be tempted to try one of the more questionable options, a tonic laced with chloroform perhaps, or a spoonful of something labeled only mother's relief. But be warned, Victorian sleep aids were often little more than alcohol, opiates, and sugar. They worked until they didn't, and then they kept working forever, which is to say you might not wake up at all. You blow out the lamp and lie back on a mattress stuffed with horsehair, your pillow lumpy and oddly warm. Every creak of the house sounds like a plot. Every breath of wind suggests a draft. And just as your eyes begin to droop, a clatter of hooves outside wakes you again. This, you sigh, is the delicate art of sleeping through the Victorian night. You peel back the stiff woolen covers and sit up in your narrow bed, staring into the smoky darkness. The gaslight hisses faintly down the hall, casting flickering shadows. On the wallpaper, pale ivy vines climbing endlessly upward as though trying to escape. Welcome to your Victorian bedroom, a space that looks cozy in daylight but turns downright adversarial at night. The air is damp and still. You can practically feel the coal soot settling on your skin. You take a breath and instantly regret it. There's a faint chemical tang in the air, something between mildew and metal polish. It's probably the arsenic. Yes, the arsenic. That lovely green wallpaper, fashionably called Scheele's green, is loaded with it. In fact, many upper-class bedrooms were essentially slow-acting poison chambers. Historians still argue whether it was the arsenic wallpaper or the open sewers that caused more long-term misery. But either way, you're not getting any REM sleep in here. You reach for your chamber stick and shuffle to the washstand. There's a pitcher of cold water, a cracked basin, and a tiny block of harsh soap that smells like hospital floors and lime peel. A foot bath might help according to the ladies' journals, preferably one spiked with mustard powder or eucalyptus. It's supposed to draw the nervous energy down from your head and into your feet. Victorians were obsessed with this idea of moving energy around the body, as if insomnia were just a question of bad spiritual plumbing. With your feet submerged in chilly water and your dressing gown pulled tight, you take in the room. Heavy curtains meant to keep out both light and prying eyes. A fireplace that doesn't work. A portrait of someone's grim-faced ancestor watching you from above the dresser. No matter how many times you try, you can't make that face blink. You crawl back into bed and pull the blankets up to your nose. Now begins the battle with the bed itself. First, the mattress. Feather beds are soft, yes, but in the same way that sleeping on a bag of damp birds might be considered soft. The feathers shift unpredictably, forming sudden hills and trenches that attack your spine like a passive-aggressive masseuse. You fluff your pillow a sack of more feathers and try to avoid inhaling one. Then there's the blanket. It's made of scratchy wool that clings like static and smells faintly of the upstairs maid's hands. Laundry practices in the 1800s weren't exactly Sleep Foundation approved. A blanket might be aired once a month if it's lucky, and washed once a season if you're rich. The resulting bouquet of sweat smoke and lavender sachets is somehow both calming and nauseating. You glance at the clock. It ticks loudly. Each second thuds into your ear like a snide reminder that morning will arrive whether you sleep or not. Tick, tick, tick. Some clocks even had chimes supposedly to comfort the anxious sleeper. In practice, they just reminded you every quarter hour that you're failing to drift off. Victorian sleep advice, of course, abounded. You could find it in newspaper columns, etiquette manuals, and endless health guides. They often recommended a strict bedtime routine, though their idea of relaxing involved kneeling for prayer on cold hardwood floors and drinking a glass of raw egg mixed with sherry. You might also try reciting psalms, counting backward from 100, or memorizing long passages of the Pilgrim's Progress. And don't even think about sleeping on your left side. According to one 1862 guide, that posture invites heart congestion and deviant dreams. Sleep posture was a serious issue, with one doctor warning that certain positions could derange the humors and permit wicked thoughts. You shift onto your back eyes, fluttering shut for a moment, only to be startled by a sudden thud from above. Rats, or possibly a loose shutter. Either way, nothing good. The bed frame creaks when you move the springs, groaning in complaint. You wonder how anyone ever had restful sleep in a place like this. They didn't really. Many Victorians suffered from what was called watching a condition, in which the sufferer lay awake most of the night in a state of melancholic contemplation. Poets wrote verses about it. Doctors labeled it a disease. Housewives wrote anguished diary entries describing nights that never ended. One even called it a slow and sorrowful disintegration of the self. Of course, if your room were warmer, you might at least be comfortable. But heating comes from coal fires, which are dangerous, dirty, and unpredictable. You fall asleep to the sound of embers ticking in the grate, or you try to. One moment it's too hot, the next it's gone out entirely. You pull your shawl tighter and flip your pillow to the cool side, which is somehow still warm. A draft creeps under the door, probably from a broken window down the hall. Your toes tingle with cold. Somewhere a dog barks. You lie there in the half-dark, eyes heavy but mind racing, and you realize something painful. Your bedroom is not helping you. It is fighting you. From the air to the furniture to the sounds in the walls, every part of this space has conspired to keep you awake. No blackout curtains, no white noise, no melatonin or memory foam, just you, the tick of the clock, and the quiet dread of another night lost to wakefulness. You rise again, the floorboards cold beneath your bare feet, and tiptoe across the room in hopes that something, anything might lull your senses into submission. The soft rustle of your dressing gown, the clink of porcelain on wood as you place your empty water glass on the washstand, the creak of the wardrobe door. All feel too loud, too real. Insomnia sharpens every sound like a blade. You think about calling for the doctor, but you know what that means? Another expensive visit from a man with impressive mutton chops and a black bag full of more mystery than medicine. Still, you can't deny it's tempting. Victorian doctors had a flair for drama and diagnosis. Their solutions for sleeplessness were creative, if not particularly helpful. One might recommend galvanic therapy, where a series of mild electric shocks would be applied to your scalp or spine. Another might suggest a mixture of camphor, morphine, and port wine, cheerily labeled a nightcap. There was even a physician who believed sleep could be restored by wrapping patients in cold, wet sheets and forcing them to lie still for hours, relaxing. Historians still argue whether these treatments reflected medical ignorance or simply a society so desperate for sleep it would try anything. Most agree it was both. You finally sit in the armchair beside the hearth and unwrap a leaflet left behind by the doctor's assistant. The words are printed in thin, wobbly type, a new tonic for the overwrought mind. Below that, a long list of ingredients: valerian root, foxglove essence, powdered rhubarb, and a dash of turpentine. You close the pamphlet and let it slip to the floor. You begin to understand the real secret of Victorian medicine. It wasn't about science, it was about ritual. The process of preparing a tonic, heating the water, measuring each dose, whispering a prayer, lighting a candle. This was the medicine, the illusion of control, the choreography of calm. And if that didn't work, there was always laudanum. Ah, yes, the Victorian cure-all, a dark liquid of opium dissolved in alcohol, sold over the counter, prescribed for everything from coughing to heartbreak. 1 teaspoon could hush a wailing child. 2 could put an insomniac into dreamless blackness. 3 might mean you never wake again. You watch your neighbor's shadow pass by outside your window. She's a widow, maybe in her 50s, and always up late. You imagine her at her writing desk, scribbling another page in her journal by lamplight, sipping from a tiny bottle kept hidden beneath a lace handkerchief. They used to call her the night woman, not out of malice, but fascination. In truth, sleeplessness was often gendered. Men's insomnia was seen as noble proof of their mental activity and worldly cares. Women's sleeplessness was diagnosed as hysteria. They were urged to rest, to be quiet, to drink lettuce water, and stop reading so many novels. One woman, Mary Ainsworth of Wiltshire, wrote in 1872 that she had not known full sleep in 3 seasons' time. Her doctor recommended bed rest and spiritual purity. He also gave her a small tin of pressed poppy tablets and suggested she stop wearing blue, as it might encourage night moods. You smile wryly at that. Victorian medicine often teetered on the edge of absurdity. Even elite physicians with royal appointments made declarations that today sound like satire. The moon's gaze may agitate the blood, one wrote. Another swore by rubbing brandy into the temples while repeating the Lord's Prayer backward. You pour yourself a cup of herbal tea, this one made from passion flower and elderberry, allegedly helpful, though the flavor is more reminiscent of hay left too long in the sun. It's hot at least. The warmth seeps into your hands as you cradle the cup, imagining it dissolving your tension 1 knot at a time. On the mantel, a porcelain figurine of a sleeping cherub stares back at you, mockingly serene. You wonder how many people in this neighborhood are doing exactly what you're doing right now, sitting in silence, trapped in their own restless minds, waiting for the night to release them. The clock chimes again, 2:30. You sigh and think of the nervous tonic your uncle once brought back from London, a bitter syrup of quinine and orange peel. He claimed it helped him sleep through thunderstorms and tax season, but he also swore that his gardenia bush whispered secrets, so grains of salt. You decide in a moment of rebellion to skip the medicine and lie down again. The bed is no warmer, the mattress no softer. But this time you close your eyes and try to drift by imagining something else, a walk through a still forest, the gentle rustle of leaves, the soft crunch of pine needles underfoot. Somewhere far from coal smoke, street lamps, and the neighbor's cat scratching at your shutters. The image holds for a few seconds. Your breath slows, and then scratch, clatter, rattle. The cat, of course. You roll over and bury your face in the pillow, vowing to buy more lettuce tomorrow, or stronger tea, or maybe just a better mattress, one not filled with whatever's currently poking you in the shoulder blade. You're starting to believe the lettuce might be your last hope. Yes, lettuce, the very same green crunchy salad staple now mocked by modern diets and sandwich shops. In Victorian times, it wasn't just food, it was medicine. And for the sleep-deprived soul, it was salvation in a teacup. You shuffle back to the kitchen, a small cold room with stone tiles that chill your feet even through wool socks. You light a stubby candle, pull a chipped pot from the shelf, and grab the limp head of lettuce from its place beside the pickled onions. It's not exactly fresh, but then neither are you. Victorians believed that lettuce contained a natural sedative called lactucarium found in the white sap that oozes from its stem when cut. Herbalists and home doctors praised it as a gentle, safe way to calm the nerves, relieve coughs, and most importantly, invite sleep. Boil the leaves, steep them in water, drink it warm, repeat as needed. It was basically the 19th century version of Have you tried yoga? Historians still argue whether lettuce water actually worked or whether it was just another case of placebo wrapped in Victorian charm. Some pharmacologists today say that the sedative effect of lactucarium is so mild it's almost mythical. Others argue that when you're desperate enough, ritual and belief do most of the heavy lifting. You set the pot to boil and listen to the soft hiss of steam, the whisper of water preparing to become something hopeful. The kitchen smells faintly of earth and brass polish. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor coughs behind a thin wall. A dog barks once, then silence. As the lettuce simmers, you think about other late-night remedies that have come and gone. Warming bricks at the hearth to slip between the sheets. Rubbing camphor on your chest, counting blessings, sniffing lavender sachets sewn by hand. A whole economy of bedtime rituals built not on certainty but on stubborn hope. In some households, lettuce water was just one piece of the nighttime puzzle. Others added ingredients, lemon balm, chamomile, fennel, a pinch of sugar if you could afford it, or if your aunt was feeling bold, a splash of port wine. You strain the mixture into a small cup. It's pale green and smells faintly like boiled garden weeds, which technically it is. You sip it slowly. It's not delicious, but it's warm, comforting. It feels like something your grandmother would hand you with a kiss on the forehead and a whispered, "There now." In the parlor, the fire has gone out. The embers pulse faintly. A soft red glow that lights the floorboards just enough to remind you they're still there. You return to your chair, blanket pulled up over your legs and cup in hand. The liquid warms your chest as it goes down, and you imagine it winding its way to your brain, untangling the knots, quieting the noise. Outside, a light fog has crept in. Gas lamps along the street blur into halos of amber light. The occasional silhouette drifts past a constable, perhaps, or a baker, heading to work hours before dawn. You wonder if they drink lettuce water too. You close your eyes and try to picture a field. Not a dark, moody Victorian field, but a sunny one. Wide, quiet, with wind brushing through stalks of wild lettuce. The kind that grows tall and spindly, exuding its sleepy sap beneath a clear sky. You imagine lying there, on a patch of soft moss, letting the world hum around you, while your body sinks deeper into the earth. And then you remember Victorians didn't just drink lettuce water. Some of them bathed in it. Yes, really. Lettuce leaf baths were a thing, especially among upper-class ladies with delicate nerves. An entire tub of boiled lettuce water cooled just enough to be tolerable, into which you'd sink with a sigh and stay for an hour. If that didn't knock you out, you could always follow it with a lettuce poultice on the forehead. Because why not? One magazine from 1884 even suggested soaking handkerchiefs in lettuce infusion and laying them across the eyes at bedtime. You picture it now yourself, lying in bed, eyes veiled in lettuce-scented linen like a human salad, hoping the nightmares don't find you. Victorians believed the key to sleep was not just physical comfort, but moral order. A tidy room, a tidy mind, clean conscience, clean sheets. Many nighttime habits were cloaked in that stiff Victorian mix of piety and politeness. Sleep wasn't a luxury, it was a duty. To wake refreshed was to better serve society, one well-rested soul at a time. Of course, this pressure to sleep perfectly often made things worse. Sound familiar? You finish your cup and stare at the bottom, hoping for signs, a leaf shaped like a heart maybe, or a swirl that points to peace. Nothing. Just a faint green film and a tiny fragment of stem. You set it aside, lean back, and close your eyes again. Your heart slows, your breath evens, you wait and wait, but your mind, as always, has other plans. It begins to whisper softly at first, then louder. Reminders, regrets, shopping lists, that strange thing you said last week to your cousin, the fact that you'll be tired tomorrow, the fact that you're already tired now. Still, something about the lettuce water settles you, even if it doesn't sedate you. The ritual, the warmth, the pause. You're not asleep, but you're quieter inside. And in the middle of a long Victorian night that's already a win. The kettle whistles again, not urgently, but with that tired, rattling wheeze that mirrors how you feel. You consider a second helping of lettuce water, just to be sure. But you also remember the pamphlet from your cousin's wife warning against over-reliance on herbal infusions. According to her, the body mustn't become too dependent on vegetation for peace. You chuckle softly. Victorians had a talent for turning everything sleep meals, even tea, into a moral battleground. Still, perhaps it's time to vary your approach. You peer through your collection of dusty jars and paper-wrapped herbs. There's lemon balm, smelling faintly like furniture polish, and something labeled cat's whiskers in a faded ink that probably once said something else entirely. You reach instead for the tried and true chamomile. Chamomile was the queen of Victorian sleep teas, prescribed by doctors, brewed by grandmothers, and endorsed by poets. A cup of chamomile, they said, binds the soul to softness. You're not sure if that's true, but it feels like the kind of thing you want to believe at 3:00 a.m. The cup warms your palms as you walk it back to your bedroom. You pass the grandfather clock in the hallway, its pendulum swinging with annoying precision. Tick, tock, tick. You almost envy its rhythm. As you settle back into your chair, you try to empty your thoughts. But the night isn't done with you yet, because just beyond the quiet comfort of your room, the city itself is awake. Not the whole city, just the parts that never really rest. You hear the clatter of hooves on cobblestones as a carriage rattles past, probably a doctor on call or a man stumbling home from a club that only pretends to care about curfews. Further off, you catch the low chug of a factory, still running through the night. It releases a wheezing whistle, a sort of mechanical sigh that says, "There is no bedtime for progress." This was one of the darker gifts of the Industrial Revolution noise. Relentless, inescapable, human-made sound. Factories, trains, steam pumps, night watchmen calling the hour. Even at its quietest, the Victorian city buzzes like a thing with its own insomnia. Some scholars argue that this constant low-level noise was more damaging to sleep than any of the herbal tonics were helpful. And you believe it. Even now, even here with chamomile coating your throat and wool around your legs, you can feel the tension thrumming just under the silence. You wonder how people escaped it. The noise, the nerves, the creeping pressure to wake early and perform your part in the Victorian theater of virtue. One popular theory was the tea could soothe not only the body but the soul. But the Victorians, ever suspicious of pleasure, also feared its excess. Drinking too much tea, especially at night, was believed to overstimulate the nervous system, dry out the brain, and make one prone to overthinking. And what is insomnia if not the Olympic sport of overthinking? Even worse, some insisted that late-night tea weakened the moral spine. Loose sleep begets loose thinking, warned one pamphlet. And from loose thinking all wickedness springs. You stare at your tea and wonder if it's judging you now. Of course, tea wasn't the only go-to remedy. Many insomniacs turned to books. Not page-turners or thrillers, but proper Victorian tomes. Medical dictionaries, psalms, almanacs, a bit of Charles Dickens if you were feeling indulgent, or Tennyson if you needed something respectably tragic. You reach for a book on your own side table. Practical household remedies for the moral and physical weaknesses of modern life. It's less a book and more a doorstop filled with recipes, reflections, and advice. Columns on topics like when to abstain from oranges and the benefits of horse milk. You flip through the section on sleep. One entry reads, should the eyes remain dry and unfocused, in the small hours wrap a coin in muslin, tie it around the big toe, and face north. You stare at the page and wonder how many desperate souls did just that half-believing, half-hoping, fully exhausted. You try to imagine your great-grandmother, perhaps, in a similar chair, sipping similar tea, reading similar nonsense. Was she more rested than you? Or simply better at pretending? Eventually your eyes do begin to grow heavier. Not with sleep exactly, but with the weight of so many failed solutions. And yet the trying is part of the ritual. Boiling the water, selecting the tea, holding the cup like a talisman against the night. Maybe the magic isn't in the leaves. Maybe it's in the patience. You finish your tea, it doesn't fix anything, but for now that's enough. You blow out the candle, leaving just the dim amber glow from the hallway. You listen to the silence, not total, but deep enough to float in. Somewhere down the block, a milk cart rumbles by wooden wheels, whining against wet stone. Morning isn't far now, but it hasn't claimed the night just yet. You pull the blanket tighter and exhale through your nose. If you sleep, you sleep. If not, there's always another cup, another remedy, another quiet hour to sit and sip and wait. You've given up on sleep, at least for now. The tea's gone, the candle is burned low, and your eyes, though heavy, refuse to surrender. So you pace, slowly, quietly, bare feet, brushing against creaky floorboards that seem to disapprove of your every step. Outside, the world is darker now, the gas lights, mere glimmers in a thickening fog. The city isn't quiet, it's just whispering. In the distance, a steam whistle cuts through the hush, sharp, metallic, and deeply unfriendly. It's the 2:45 a.m. signal from a textile mill 2 streets over. Not a fire alarm, not a curfew bell, just an ordinary part of industrial life. Shifts, changing machines, starting again, bodies reporting for labor in the dead of night. You shiver. The whistle was probably meant to be efficient, but at this hour it feels like a scream. This is one of the many reasons Victorians couldn't sleep. Their cities never truly stopped. The rise of industry meant that the night no longer belonged to the stars and dreams. It belonged to factories' carts, newspapers, and night watchmen with clanging boots. The sacred silence of pre-industrial life had been sold off one shriek of steam at a time. You lean on the windowsill and peer down. A lamplighter passes his long pole, lifted skyward to douse the last few gas flames. His footsteps echo slow and steady on the cobbles. You imagine he's done this route so many times that even in sleep, he'd still know where every lamp stands. Historians still argue whether Victorian insomnia was truly more common than it is today, or whether it just happened to coincide with a flood of diaries, letters, and medical reports that cataloged it obsessively. Either way, it's clear that people noticed something had changed. Nights felt different, more crowded, more anxious, less sacred. You pull back from the window and glance at your fireplace, just a few dim coals left now. You remember reading somewhere that firelight helped produce natural fatigue. Something about the flicker mimicking the sun's descent. But your fire has grown tired before you have, and the room is slipping into a damp chill again. You sit back down and wrap yourself in a shawl. Your mind wanders. There was an idea at the time passed around medical journals and public lectures that modernity itself was making people ill. The trains were too fast, the telegrams too sudden, the gas lights too bright. They spoke of neurasthenia, a vague but fashionable diagnosis for anyone feeling overwhelmed, fatigued, or emotionally frayed. The modern mind, they argued, was cracking under pressure. And where did that pressure show itself first? At night, you're reminded of something a popular magazine once declared the modern soul, when robbed of sleep, loses its sense of direction. Not exactly helpful when you're curled up in a lumpy chair, but poetic nonetheless. You shuffle to the desk and leaf through some correspondence, letters from friends, bills, a short note from your sister in Bath asking, "Have you tried lavender oil behind the ears?" You smile. Everyone has a remedy. No one has a cure. And still the world outside moves. Another sound now, a distant rattle of wooden wheels. The bread cart, perhaps, beginning its route before sunrise. The driver humming low and tuneless to keep himself awake. A horse snorts. You wonder how many of your neighbors are up like you, listening to the city in these twilight hours. For some, the city is a comfort. It distracts from silence, which can be louder than anything mechanical. But for others like you tonight, it's just a reminder of life continuing without rest, without pause. In wealthier neighborhoods, you imagine things are quieter. Homes set back from the road, buffered by gardens and hedges, thick curtains, private nurses, doses of opiates measured in spoons of silver. But even then there are letters, reports, confessions from the sleepless elite, lords and ladies pacing gilded parlors, wondering whether the mind can ever truly be at peace. You light a new candle, the flame flutters, and you watch the shadows return to the walls. There's the dresser, the warped floor plank, the painting of the river, all of them keeping you company whether you like it or not. You try to lie down again, though your body protests. The mattress has settled into shapes you didn't approve. The blanket scratches. But you close your eyes anyway and listen. The faint drip of water in the kitchen, sink. The coal's last breath in the hearth. The muffled rhythmic tap of something metallic in the street, a nail in a wheel perhaps. It's not silence, but it's not chaos either. It's a kind of ambient noise, the sort your ears might eventually accept. And that's the game now. Let your body sink. Let your breath slow. Pretend the world is soft even when it's not. Let yourself float, just for a moment, on the sleepy hum of a city that doesn't sleep. You roll onto your side, tucking the blanket under your chin like a fragile promise. The pillow sighs beneath your head, lumpy but loyal. Your body, finally tired enough to stop resisting, begins to settle until you remember the bed itself may be betraying you. Not with ghosts or hidden springs, but with something even worse, microscopic companions. Victorian mattresses, especially among the working class and lower middle households, were rarely replaced and almost never properly cleaned. They were stuffed with feathers, horsehair straw, or rags, depending on your station. Over time, these materials collected more than just body heat. They gathered dust mites, bed bugs, and an entire social scene of parasitic intruders. You try not to think about it as you pull your feet in tight. At least you're not sleeping on hay tonight, or on the floor, like many laborers who couldn't afford a proper bedstead. Even so, it's a hard-earned truth of the Victorian era. The bed you dream in is not always your friend. One popular magazine from 1881 advised readers to beat their mattresses with a good strong stick each week to dislodge any nesting creatures. Another suggested an hour of direct sunshine to kill the night's excess humidity. You make a mental note that both options seem optimistic, especially in a city that gets 6 hours of sunlight on a good day. Historians still debate whether the horror of the Victorian featherbed contributed to chronic sleep issues. Some claim it was more psychological. People were simply too aware of their discomfort. Others argue that persistent physical irritants made true rest impossible. You lying here on what feels like a burlap sack full of pigeons suspect both theories are valid. You scratch your arm gently, just a touch of wool rash, you hope. And then there are the sheets. You'd expect something soft or at least neutral, but Victorian linens were washed, rarely starched heavily, and often made of coarse fibers that resisted softness, the way your brain resists peace at 4:00 a.m. Even worse, they were sometimes infused with lavender oil, or in poorer homes, kerosene and vinegar, believed to kill the ill humors. You shift again. The blanket pulls tight, and you feel that cold, traitorous draft creep up from the foot of the bed. The fireplace has long since died. The hot water bottle under the sheets has gone tepid. And you remember the advice from your great-aunt's old etiquette book, cold feet are the enemy of moral clarity. You're not sure what that means, but it sounds accusatory. In wealthier homes, the linens might be finer, but even the upper crust wasn't spared nighttime discomfort. Grand four-poster beds draped in velvet might seem luxurious, but they trapped heat-stifled airflow and provided an ideal habitat for moths and mildew. One socialite in 1869 claimed she kept a sharp hat pin beneath her pillow to prod her maid awake in case of midnight bugs. Classy. You briefly consider getting up again, but inertia has you pinned. Instead, you try to distract yourself. You imagine yourself elsewhere, somewhere soft, quiet, a grassy knoll under the stars, a featherless mattress in a forest glade. No city noise, no gas lamps, no neighbors coughing through the walls. Just wind, sky, and a very large dog to keep your feet warm. Back in reality, the candle flickers on your bedside table almost out. Its flame leans sideways for a moment, then steadies. You watch its rhythm, breathing with it. Inhale, flicker, exhale. The room is still full of Victorian heaviness-layered wallpaper. Too many chairs, embroidered cushions that exist only to be moved and never sat on. You've never understood why every flat surface needs doilies. No one has. Not even the Victorians. A thump from upstairs breaks your trance. Probably the lodger. He works odd hours, comes and goes like fog, and smells faintly of linseed oil and foreign tobacco. You wonder what keeps him up at night? Money, worries, regrets. The same scratchy sheets. You find yourself strangely comforted by the thought of someone else pacing, blinking, listening to a clock that ticks just a bit too loud. You reach again for your glass of water. Room temperature. Slightly dusty. But the act of drinking gives your hands something to do. It grounds you. The night continues. Time passes or it doesn't. You're no longer sure. You've begun to lose that clear boundary between wakefulness and dreaming. Your thoughts drift in strange patterns, looping back to earlier worries, then forward to things that haven't happened yet. You imagine a conversation with Queen Victoria herself. "You're tired, Your Majesty," you say. "So are you," she replies. And that's it. That's the whole dream. You close your eyes again. You let your breath deepen. The bed isn't comfortable. The room isn't quiet. But there's a strange kind of acceptance now. You've done everything you could. You've brewed the lettuce, lit the candle, read the book, fluffed the pillow, blamed the wallpaper. Maybe sleep will take pity on you now. You wake not fully, but just enough to remember that you never quite slept. The kind of waking where your limbs feel disconnected, your thoughts unfinished, and your mouth a little too dry. The candle has finally gone out, leaving only the faintest hint of smoke lingering in the air. Your blanket is bunched around your knees like a defeated flag. It's sometime before dawn. The city outside has dimmed into a deeper quiet, the kind of hush that even factories respect. But sleep still won't come, so you reach for the advice columns, not because you expect help, but because they're absurd enough to distract you. "Dear Miss Virtue," one begins, "I find myself overly energetic after supper and inclined to melancholy by midnight. Should I consult a physician or simply avoid peas?" You read on, smiling at the recommendation, a dinner of soft custards and a brisk evening walk away from gaslight reflections. Victorians believed that digestion and emotion were intimately connected. A heavy dinner. Expect nightmares. A late lunch. Prepare for spiritual restlessness. There were whole books devoted to what you should and should not eat if you ever hope to dream sweetly. One physician wrote in 1863 that the stomach is the cradle of sleep. Another warned that eating meat after 6 p.m. could summon dreadful phantoms to the imagination. You wonder how many of your sleepless nights are the fault of that extra slice of roast or the suspicious fish pie you had on Tuesday. Still, digestion was only one culprit. Others blamed posture. Were you sleeping too upright, too flat? Was your mattress too warm? Was your pillow lifting your head into dangerous philosophical territory? Historians still argue whether any of these sleep prescriptions were remotely useful. But they all agreed on one thing. If you wanted true rest, you had to deserve it. It wasn't just about comfort, it was about discipline. So you consider your discipline? Did you commit any moral infractions today? Did you speak out of turn or skip prayer or fail to show proper gratitude to the housemaid who watered the geraniums? Is this insomnia punishment for being too sarcastic in your own head? It's hard to say. In the corner of the room, the shadows shift slightly, probably the wind, or maybe just the wallpaper playing tricks again. You pull the blanket up and try to meditate in your own way. You think of stillness, of water, of fields, of beds that don't creak like they're haunted. You picture yourself in a hydropathic spa. Yes, those were all the rage. Across the countryside, well-heeled Victorians flocked to restorative retreats, where the cure for everything, including insomnia, was water, cold water, hot water, water to drink water, to soak in water, to be violently sprayed at your back while you stand in a marble hallway in your underclothes. Hydropathy was founded on the belief that modern life had overheated the nervous system. Too much tea, too much talk, too many tight corsets. The answer, a dunk in a freezing stream, or a towel soaked in cold vinegar wrapped around your scalp, or possibly a lettuce broth served at dawn before a session of barefoot gravel walking. You imagine yourself walking that gravel path, wincing with each step, clutching a robe that doesn't quite close. Your fellow patients nod silently, as if this shared suffering will somehow lead them into dreamland. Some claimed success, others pneumonia. You shift again and remember another hydropathic suggestion, the wet sheet wrap. You'd be swaddled like a sandwich in cold, damp linens, then tucked into bed and told not to move. The chill draws out the inner fever, they said. Or more accurately, it made people so miserable, they forgot they couldn't sleep. Still, you can't help but admire the effort, the rituals, the belief that sleep could be summoned through intention technique and a little cucumber water. You open your eyes to the darkness of your room. A soft breeze brushes against the curtain. The wallpaper, the heavy armoire, the threadbare rug, all just as they were an hour ago. And yet something has changed. You feel heavier, slower, a little more detached from the edges of your own restlessness. Maybe it's the tea, maybe it's the exhaustion finally catching up, or maybe it's just the comfort of knowing that even in a world that never quite stops, there are still spaces like this, still hours like this when doing nothing feels like enough. You sink into the pillow, its awkward shape, suddenly less offensive. Your last thought before drifting is this: if the lettuce doesn't work, maybe try peas after all. You awaken again, not by alarm or sunbeam, but by that invisible tug that yanks the half-asleep back into full consciousness. The room is darker now than ever. The candle is gone. The embers are cold, and the fog outside has thickened into a hush, so dense you could almost chew it. The only sound is the soft groan of the house itself, settling into the bones of another Victorian morning. You rise slowly. Your joints protest. Your neck has crumpled into the shape of your lumpy pillow. And as you stand, your legs tingle with the faint indignation of having been folded for too long under wool and worry. You're beginning to understand why the Victorians developed such elaborate bedtime routines. If nothing else, they gave you a sense of control, something to do, something to trust. You shuffle into the parlor and light the smallest lamp. It throws a weak circle of yellow across the floorboards and the fraying edge of the rug. On the table lies a book of collected poetry by Christina Rossetti. You flip it open randomly and read a few lines aloud, barely above a whisper: rest, rest, a perfect rest, shed over brow and breast. You close the book. Maybe poets were the only ones who ever really slept. You remember a note in one of the health almanacs. The true enemy of sleep is not noise nor diet, but thought uninvited. And there it is, your real problem. The world may be quiet, the tea may be drunk, but your mind, it's hosting a gala. You sit back down, nestle into the chair's crook, and consider trying something radical, something that wasn't in the manuals, pamphlets, or polite society guides. You consider doing absolutely nothing. Not a technique, not a prayer, not even a second helping of herbal brew. Just sitting, breathing, letting your mind spin its little dramas without trying to stop it. Not fighting sleep, not chasing it, just waiting for it to wander over curious. And as you sit there, something curious happens. You remember a strange case you once heard about Mrs. Daltrey of York, a woman who claimed she hadn't slept a full night in over a decade. Her solution? She began sleepwalking, deliberately. Each night she would rise, walk the corridors of her home, then return to bed, as if she'd accomplished something grand. My legs sleep for me, she once joked. Her neighbors were less amused when she wandered into their goose shed. Victorian medicine never figured her out. Some called her delusional, others oddly enlightened. Historians still argue whether her case was psychosomatic brilliance or just a cleverly disguised breakdown. Either way, you envy her confidence. You stretch your arms, wincing at the stiffness in your shoulders. Then you glance at the clock. 4:53 a.m. Almost morning. That strange in-between time when even the most stubborn insomniacs stop resisting and start drifting. The world softens just before dawn, like the tension in a symphony, finally releasing into its final lingering note. You stand again, walk to the window, and pull the curtain back a few inches. The fog outside is beginning to pale. There's a hint of light at the edges of the rooftops. Not gold, not yet, but something softer than black. The city will stir soon. Vendors, carriages, children, trudging to early lessons. You think of the paper boys rubbing sleep from their eyes as they stumble down cobblestones, bags clinking with coins and ink. You think of the milkman, the chimney sweeps, the servants lighting fires in cold houses. And you still here, still awake. But maybe not entirely. Your breath has slowed. Your body has given up its protest. You are in this moment a person at the edge of sleep, not trying to cross it, just sitting at its border like an old friend on a bench. A final cup of tea would be overkill now. The water's cold, the herbs used. But you light one more candle out of habit more than need and sit back, once more eyes half closed. You think of all the advice you've read tonight, the tinctures, the vinegar wraps, the rules about peas and postures and psalms, and you wonder how many Victorians ever truly slept. Or were they like you, just learning how to be at peace with the not sleeping? Maybe rest doesn't have to be perfect. Maybe it doesn't even have to be sleep. Maybe the act of trying gently, patiently, without force is the most restful thing of all. You yawn, finally. Not a theatrical yawn, not a forced one, but the kind that arrives without fanfare. The kind that says the gates are beginning to open. You settle in, let your shoulders drop. Let the chair cradle your weight. Let the fog blur your thoughts. And if sleep arrives, it'll find you already halfway there. You must have dozed off just a little, not long and not deeply, but enough to miss the exact moment the sky turned gray. The fog outside has thinned. Shapes are becoming clearer. Rooftops and chimneys appear again like forgotten characters returning to the stage. Your mouth is dry. Your back aches. But you smile a little because even that fleeting rest felt like something real. A borrowed moment of quiet in a world that demands so much motion. The room is cooler now. You can feel it on your fingertips and the back of your neck. The fire is completely out, not even embers now, just cold ash. You pull the shawl tighter and imagine the first servant in the house next door stoking her mistress's hearth hands red with cold and eyes still half shut. You glance toward the window and notice something odd. It's silent outside. No hooves, no cartwheels, no distant factory whistle. For just a breath, London has gone still. This is the hour Victorians knew best as the angels hush. It's not just before morning, it's before even the birds have remembered to sing. You imagine someone like you in a house across the alley, sitting in their own dim parlor, a widower with a cough, a school teacher with a head full of lesson plans, a young maid writing a letter she'll never send, all of you suspended in the same soft pause. There's comfort in that, strangely, a kind of quiet solidarity among strangers who never sleep when they're supposed to. You stretch again, joints clicking softly. You consider standing, making a new fire, beginning the rituals of the day. But something keeps you here. in this stillness, in this moment where time feels untied. You let your mind wander to the women who dipped their hands in chilled rose water, believing it cooled the nerves, to the men who swore by smoking a pipe of Syrian tobacco before bed, claiming it slowed the heart, to the countless pamphlets that declared lettuce water, if steeped long enough, could banish even the darkest thoughts. And then there was the fringe. Victorians loved fringe science.
You remember reading about a man who built a bed with magnets embedded in the headboard? He believed sleep could be drawn into the body via magnetic pull like iron filings to the brain. Another sold copper socks, claiming they rerouted electrical currents out through the toes. You can't help but laugh softly, though you admit you would have bought the socks. Historians still argue whether these eccentric cures did more harm than good. But what's undeniable is the yearning behind them. The deep, persistent ache for rest. Not just sleep, but peace, stillness, reprieve. And really, isn't that still true? You hear in the hush, surrounded by ghostly furniture and ticking clocks, still searching for something to soothe the mind. Your gaze drifts to the corner where an old rocking chair sits. It hasn't moved all night, but somehow it seems softer now, less like furniture, and more like memory. You imagine someone, an aunt, a cousin, someone long gone rocking, gently in it, humming a tune that no longer has a name. You feel your eyelids dip again. This time the pull is stronger. The lines of the room blur a little. The candle's glow stretches and softens. The clock ticks slower. Or maybe you just hear it differently now. You don't need another cup of tea. You don't need a wrap or a tonic or a lecture on moral rest. You just need this. The quiet, the breath, the space between thoughts. Sleep, when it finally comes, doesn't knock. It drifts in like fog, wraps around you like a second shawl, and gently pulls the curtain closed on your inner monologue. And if you don't wake rested well, at least you'll have tried like a Victorian with patience, curiosity, and a cup of bitter lettuce water. You stir slightly, not because of noise or discomfort, but because your mind still clings to the habit of being awake. Even now, as your body relaxes inch by inch, there's a quiet, persistent alertness of Victorian leftover, perhaps like lace curtains or anxieties over posture. You've slept a little, maybe even dreamed, but the dreams were fuzzy, indistinct, like candlelight seen through gauze. You think there was a train, or maybe a hallway lined with clocks. You're not sure. You never are this close to morning. You open your eyes to the faintest silver light at the window. Not sun, yet just the early signal that the sky is preparing to change. And with it, the mood of the world begins to shift. In the Victorian age, dawn was often feared and worshipped in equal measure. For the working class, it meant labor. For the sick, it meant more hours of aching wakefulness. But for the sleepless, it was bittersweet. A signal that the battle was over, not necessarily won, but at least paused. You feel that now. You sit up slowly, your back cracks like old wood. You stretch your legs and press your feet to the floor, which is somehow colder than before. The fire still hasn't been revived. The coals are stubborn. Maybe they too are tired of trying. You shuffle to the basin to splash your face with water. It's frigid. You hiss, then laugh. Welcome back to the waking world. There's a dull ache behind your eyes, the kind that speaks of near sleep and too many thoughts. But you feel steadier, more anchored. You've survived the night. Again, you glance toward your bedside, where a note from a friend sits, tucked beneath a paperweight shaped like a bird. You'd forgotten it was there. It reads,
If you cannot sleep, then rest. And if you cannot rest, then at least be kind to yourself. You don't remember who wrote it, but you whisper the words again, like a soft incantation. Victorians had so many names for sleeplessness, nervous wakefulness, melancholic watching brain fever. But rarely did they treat it with gentleness. They threw medicine and morality at it. Ice baths, chamomile, Psalm 23. They feared it as a sign of moral unraveling. But some found another way. A handful of reformist physicians in the 1890s began to suggest something quietly radical. Maybe insomnia wasn't a disease. Maybe it was communication. A sign that the mind was working through something unspoken. That the soul needed silence to untangle itself. Historians still debate whether these early ideas were proto-psychology or just spiritual speculation. But they feel truer somehow, don't they? You stand, stretch, and look around the room. You've begun to see it differently now. Less like a battleground, and more like a companion. The creaky chair, the lace-covered table, the wilted flower in the jar by the sill. None of them tried to stop you from sleeping. They just sat quietly with you while you tried. You run your fingers along the spines of books you didn't open, herbal comforts for the Christian soul. The Gentlewoman's Almanac, 1874, on the restoration of mental harmony, all promising answers, none quite delivering. You've learned to stop expecting certainty. In sleep, in life, in lettuce water. You pause at the window. Outside chimney smoke begins to rise in faint wobbly columns. Somewhere bread is being baked. Somewhere else a clock chimes 5. You think about how many people across the city and the world are waking with you, or trying to, or never slept at all. There's a soft hum to it, this shared struggle, a quiet choir of minds buzzing at different pitches, some loud with worry, others whispering lullabies to themselves. And then you see it. A single bird perched on the railing across the alley, small, fluffed against the cold, watching you. You nod absurdly, as if to say, I made it too. There's no triumph here, no great revelation, just the soft, slow unfolding of a night into day. You haven't conquered insomnia, you haven't mastered sleep, but you've witnessed something. The strange, dignified endurance of those who sit through the dark teacup in hand, hope flickering quietly in the background like the final candle. You step away from the window and decide not to make more tea, not to write, not even to move much. Just sit. Let the day come to you. And for the first time all night, you stop asking how to sleep. You simply wait. You're still waiting. The candle is burned out and the sky is almost something like light. Not sunrise, not yet, but the air has changed. There's that cool clarity before dawn where even the fog seems to loosen its grip. You can see the edges of things again. The chimney across the alley, the outline of your own breath against the glass. You're tired, deep in the bones. But the strange thing is, you're not upset about it anymore. The fight has passed. You're not struggling with the night, you're just sitting beside it, sharing the last hour together like old friends who don't need to speak. The chair beneath you creaks in approval. You've spent so much time in it these past hours, it almost feels like it knows your thoughts. The curve of your spine, the twitch in your knee, the way you lean forward slightly when you're trying not to hope too hard. You wrap the shawl tighter. It still smells like tea and sleep and old wood polish. You could wash it, sure. But then it wouldn't feel like this, like a cocoon you built out of patience and breath, and just enough stubbornness to keep trying. You think again of the countless Victorians who sat where you sit now in some variation of a sleepless night, the seamstress who sewed until her fingers ached, the shopkeeper tallying numbers by candlelight, the mother listening for a child's cough, and yes, the insomniac boiling lettuce at 2 or 0 a.m. like it was a prayer. Not all of them had solutions, but they had rituals, little patterns of resistance against the vast yawning dark. It wasn't about conquering the night, it was about surviving it with a measure of grace. You remember a curious entry in a health journal from 1878. A nervous woman may find peace not by closing the eyes, but by softening the mind's gaze. At the time you dismissed it as nonsense. But now in the hush of a fading night, it feels like the only thing that's ever made sense. You stand carefully, knees popping in protest, and walk to the hearth. There's nothing left but ash now, cold and gray. You stir it with the poker and watch the powder shift like memory. There will be fire again later, but not now. Right now, stillness is enough. On the writing desk sits a letter you started weeks ago and never finished. A few lines scrawled in neat ink. I've not been sleeping, but I've been thinking of you. You smile. You still don't know how to end it? Maybe you never will. Maybe that's the point. You sit again just to feel the weight of your body easing into the chair's familiar shape. You sip from the glass by your side, stale water lukewarm now, but you drink it like it's holy. And then you listen. There's a new sound. A single bird. It's not singing exactly, more like testing its voice, one cautious note then another, and in response a second bird, then a third. Slowly the city begins to fill with the tiniest, bravest music. It's not loud, not yet, but it's enough to remind you that time too is waking. You lean your head back and close your eyes, not to sleep, but to rest in that sound, that fragile promise of another day. Victorians were obsessed with beginnings. They believed that how one started a day determined its moral arc. That sunrise was a test, and those who met it with discipline and resolve would prosper. You, however, are meeting it with puffy eyes, a sore back, and the ghost of chamomile still on your tongue, and yet you feel oddly victorious, not because you slept, but because you endured the not sleeping, because you turned the long, unkind hours into something that felt almost sacred, because you learned to sit with yourself when nothing was working and no one was watching. You open your eyes again. The light is stronger now. The sky has begun to blush, just a little. A soft peach haze above the rooftops. The first carriage of the morning rattles past, and somewhere a door creaks open. The day is here, and you are still standing. You step into the morning with the reverence of someone who's survived a storm, exhausted, intact, and quietly grateful. The room is still dim, but no longer unfriendly. The walls, the floorboards, even the warped wardrobe in the corner they've shifted from looming to familiar like weary companions, finally putting down their burdens. You pull the curtain back just an inch more. Outside, the city has begun to move again. A man in a bowler hat hurries down the street, coat flapping in the breeze. A milk cart creaks by its glass bottles, clinking like wind chimes made of bone china. The butcher's apprentice sweeps the front stoop with long theatrical strokes, as though the whole world might see how thorough he is. You think about breakfast vaguely. Toast, maybe. Porridge, if there's any oats left. But the thought is more symbolic than real. Your stomach isn't ready. Your mind, oddly, is the only thing that feels soft, like the edges have been smoothed down, dulled by hours of effort and surrender. The clock ticks.
no longer a metronome of guilt, but simply a reminder time goes on, even without your permission. You sink into the chair once more just for a minute. Your body has earned that. A familiar weight settles around you. Not quite fatigue, not quite peace. Something in between. You glance at the newspaper left folded on the end table. Yesterday's edition. The headline, something about rising bread prices. Or maybe rail expansion. You don't bother reading it. You've read enough for one night. Instead, you remember another odd historical footnote. How many Victorians recorded their sleep patterns like scientists? Whole diaries filled with precise notations, retired at 9:37, sleep at 11:12, stirred at 2:08, woke fully at 4:43. These weren't just notes, they were confessions. Pleas. Attempts to make sense of a body that wouldn't obey. Some took it further. One particularly eccentric man, Sir Nathaniel Pemble, kept a sleep room in his home entirely separate from his rest room. No bed in either, just chairs, books, and a special pillow he insisted could only be used during odd-numbered hours. Historians still argue whether he was deeply disturbed or just ahead of his time. But what all of them shared, Sir Pemble, the diarists, the letter writers, the lettuce boilers, was the desire to understand sleep, to study it, to master it, as if it were a beast to be tamed rather than a state to be entered. You've stopped trying to tame it. You know now that sleep cannot be cornered, cannot be forced. It arrives like fog or poetry, when it pleases, and never when you're staring directly at it. The fire crackles faintly now. You don't remember lighting it again, but someone must have. Or maybe the last ember clung to life longer than expected. Either way, there's warmth again. It smells like cedar and memory. You let yourself sink into it. At the edge of your mind, a verse stirs. Something you read long ago, maybe Rossetti again, maybe someone else. Sleep that knits up the raveled sleeve of care. Shakespeare, of course. Even he knew. Even in his time, people lay awake and wondered why their minds would not quiet. You reach for the half-filled journal by your elbow. Just a line or two, you think. Not to analyze the night, not to solve it, but to acknowledge it. To mark that you lived it. You write. The night was long, but not empty. I learned to listen. You put the pen down. And then you sit back watching the sunlight creep slowly up the wallpaper, lighting the ivy patterns like vines newly grown. The room becomes golden. The edges become soft. You've not conquered the night, but you have befriended it. And that may be the beginning of sleep after all. You don't rush the morning, not today. There are no urgent footsteps, no clattering dishes, just you and the slow return of color to a world that spent hours in charcoal gray. You linger in the silence, letting the day assemble itself. Piece by piece, light climbs the walls, shadows retreat. The sky, once a heavy lid, begins to bloom. There's something about surviving a night of near sleep that makes morning feel more earned than usual. It's not triumph exactly, it's something humbler. A kind of quiet partnership with the hours that passed. You didn't sleep, not really, but you also didn't crumble. You move with intention now. The teacup goes to the basin. The shawl gets folded, then unfolded again, draped carefully over the back of your chair, as if it too needs a little rest. You open a window just slightly. The fog has thinned and the air smells of coal smoke and bread. And something else, wet stone, that clean mineral scent of a city that's exhaled overnight. You breathe it in deeply. It's not pleasant exactly, but it's real. And that's enough. You move through your home like a curator now, pausing at objects you ignored during the night. A spool of thread on the windowsill. A hairpin dropped beside the stove. The faint ring left by your teacup on the side table. Each one a tiny artifact of endurance. You take inventory of your body. Shoulders stiff, fingers cold, eyes puffy but no longer burning. You've lived in this body through every phase of the night. Frustration, restlessness, surrender. And now you inhabit it with a strange sense of familiarity. This is the body that didn't give up. That kept trying even when nothing worked. Victorians might have seen that as a moral victory. You remember reading in one of those household guides, the gentle restorative, that to persist through sleeplessness with grace is to join the angels in watchful meditation. That line used to irritate you. Now it just makes you nod. You glance toward your bookshelf, wondering if one of those night manuals might still be worth reading. You smile, probably not, but maybe worth saving for the next time sleep slips away. And then there's the bed. You return to it slowly, not to sleep, but to smooth the sheets, fluff the pillow, and offer it a second chance. The mattress still sighs under your touch, still carries the weight of your tossing. But there's no resentment now, only recognition. You and the bed are old partners in this dance. You sit on the edge and stare at your feet, curled against the cold floorboards. There's something grounding about it. The way the wood creaks under your heels, the way the wool of your socks bunches slightly at the ankle. You are finally completely present. And in that presence, you find the memory of another Victorian ritual, the morning gratitude. Not the kind posted to a mantle or proclaimed in parlor conversation, but a private practice, often unspoken, sometimes scribbled in journals, that invited the sleepless to find something to thank, even when the night had failed them. You try it now. You thank the candle for its company. You thank the chair for holding you. You thank the lettuce water not for working, but for trying. You thank the night even in its stubbornness. You thank yourself. And then you do something bold. You lie back down. Not to sleep. There's no pressure now, but just to lie down. To rest because you can. Because your body has earned it. You fold your hands gently on your stomach, close your eyes, and let the weight of the blanket settle around you like a lullaby you can finally hear. You won't stay long. The day is waiting. But for just a few minutes more, you allow yourself this grace to lie still without needing to fix or improve anything. No more herbal tricks. No posture corrections. No prayers whispered between yawns. Just breath, just stillness, just the quiet pleasure of having made it through. And so you lie there awake but without urgency. The world has begun its daily march beyond your window boots on cobblestones, the rhythmic clink of milk bottles, a child shouting something indistinct into the morning mist. But in here, your room remains untouched by the tempo of the day. There's peace in that, a kind of suspended animation. The house hasn't asked anything of you yet, nor has the clock. You breathe evenly, not with purpose, but with a natural rhythm that only reveals itself once you've stopped trying. This is what the Victorians might have called the passive hour, an in-between space too late to be, night too early to be considered part of the morning bustle. It was during this time that many of them wrote letters, prayed, or simply sat by the window and watched the city stretch itself awake. It was not work and it was not sleep. It was something else, a sacred pause. You are in that pause now. You hear a kettle whistle faintly next door, a neighbor beginning their morning rituals. You wonder if they slept. You wonder if they tried the same remedies as you. Perhaps they boiled the lettuce. Perhaps they just gave up.
Perhaps they too are lying quietly watching the soft movement of shadows along their walls. You reach for your journal not to document the night in painful detail, but just to leave a trace, a line or two. Nothing profound, just the night held me. I held back, but we sat together until morning. You close the book and set it aside. The room is no longer dim but golden. Dust dances in shafts of light near the window. You can see the fine details of the wallpaper now, the faded green ivy, the cracks where moisture tried to peel the paper back, the delicate borders worn smooth from decades of sun. It feels less like a prison than it did last night. You sit up slowly. Your body is stiff, but no longer aching. The sleep you didn't get has been replaced with something quieter, rest that doesn't demand proof of itself. Victorian thinkers often divided sleep into categories: slumber, rest, dreaming, and repose. They believed repose was the most noble, the most refined. It meant lying still in body and in spirit, without agitation or expectation. It was less about unconsciousness and more about dignity. You may not have slumbered deeply, but you have found repose. You dress slowly, each movement careful, deliberate. The chill of the fabric against your skin wakes you gently, reminding you that the body, like the mind, needs small signals to return to the world. You smooth the bedclothes, straighten the books, and open the window a bit more. The outside air flows in, not biting, but fresh. It carries with it the promise of a new cycle, one that will eventually bring night again. But you don't dread it, not anymore. You've made peace with the dark. You think of the generations before you who did the same, not with apps or blackout curtains, but with herbs, warm stones, letters by candlelight. Their methods may have been odd, even dangerous. But beneath the arsenic-lined wallpaper and the opium tinctures, they were simply people tired, hopeful, and full of longing for a little peace between sunset and sunrise. Historians still debate whether Victorian remedies did more harm than good, but the rituals mattered. They gave shape to the waiting. They made the sleepless hours less lonely. You understand now? You carry that understanding with you as you leave the bedroom. The floor creaks underfoot, not complaining, just announcing. You pass the mirror and catch your reflection, hair-tousled eyes, shadowed but somehow softer. You look like someone who endured something ordinary and difficult and meaningful. In the kitchen, you prepare a simple breakfast, nothing grand, just something warm, something grounding. A slice of toast, a bit of butter. A quiet moment, you carry the plate to the table and sit in the sunlight. And there, with your hands curled around a chipped mug, you feel it. Not victory, not clarity, but rest. At last, you linger over breakfast longer than usual. Not because you're especially hungry, but because you've earned the right to go slow. Every movement is deliberate. Spreading the butter, sipping the tea, folding the napkin in your lap, like someone in control of time itself. Outside, the city now hums with full voice. Carriages jostle for space. Footsteps echo in tight alleys. A vendor calls out prices for oranges in a thick, sleepy accent. You let it all remain outside, beyond the glass, beyond the curtain, like a distant play you've decided not to audition for this morning. You have other roles to play today, yes, but not yet. You return to your writing desk, where the faint imprint of your elbow rests in the wood grain from the night before. The journal still sits open. A few petals from a dried flower, forgotten between pages weeks ago, have slipped free. You gather them gently without thinking and place them by the sill. A strange kind of still life echoing the night. You begin to write not out of duty, not even to record, but because something in you has settled. The quiet after a storm isn't silence, it's relief. You write about the chair, the shawl, the taste of lettuce water, the candle's final flicker, about how odd it felt to talk yourself through an entire night, about how many invisible people must be doing the same right now in their own kitchens and parlors and lonely flats. The act of writing becomes another ritual, a mark of presence, not triumph, not revelation, just I was here. And perhaps for the Victorian Insomniacs before you, that was the true purpose of all those diaries and remedies and elaborate sleep logs, not to conquer sleep, but to witness the long night without flinching. You pause as a thought comes in a world where sleep is fickle. Maybe the most human thing we can do is keep company with ourselves. You tuck that line away in your journal and sit back. A breeze rolls in through the open window, ruffling the page. You watch it lazily, feeling no urge to chase it. You'll rewrite the sentence if you have to. For now, you let the air be part of your morning. You remember another bit of Victorian advice, this one from a physician named Dr. James Wilson. If sleep will not come to you, become its friend. Greet it kindly each evening, but never insist it stay. You wonder how many people back then understood the wisdom of that, how many simply thought it was another way of blaming the patient. But now, having lived through the kind of night that asks nothing but patience, it rings differently. It's not about blame, it's about surrender, about turning towards sleep, like an old friend who sometimes forgets to show up, but always means well. You leave the window open as you clean up. The chair is placed back where it belongs. The cup is rinsed, dried, and returned to its hook. You brush a few crumbs into your palm and drop them outside onto the ledge. Within seconds, a sparrow arrives, hesitant and delighted. Even the smallest things respond to gentleness. You find your coat, shake the dust from the hem, and button it slowly. You're not in a rush. The day will still be there when you step into it. And in that moment, you realize something quiet but profound. There's dignity in enduring the long night, even if sleep never fully comes. You're not weaker for it. You're not broken. You're simply human, moving through a world that often asks too much of your nervous system, your soul, your spine. You made it. You're not the first to carry that victory in silence, and you won't be the last. You step outside. The morning sun filters through a thin mist. The stones beneath your boots are damp. A cat slinks by without urgency. You join the city not with force, but with grace. You walk slowly, feeling every step. And in that walking, you begin again. You walk through the morning as if through a memory. Familiar streets take on new textures. In the golden light, brick walls glisten faintly with dew, storefront windows cloud with condensation, and iron lampposts wear delicate crowns of spider webs. The city has not changed overnight, but you have. The fog has lifted in more ways than one. The grocer on the corner waves as you pass. His sleeves are already rolled hands dusted in flower eyes, puffy with the kind of fatigue that comes from early labor, not late-night restlessness. You nod back. No words exchanged, just recognition. The unspoken understanding that everyone carries their own kind of tired. You step around a puddle and catch a glimpse of your reflection, pale, a little wrinkled from sleep that never quite arrived, but somehow more grounded than the version of you who started the night. You pause there in that ripple of light and water and let it be what it is. No judgment, just truth. As you walk, your mind drifts not to worry but to observation.
The woman dusting the window display at the haberdashery hums softly. The boy delivering newspapers tosses one with admirable precision. A dog tied loosely to a fence post stares at a biscuit just out of reach the leash, taut with silent hope. This you think is the world that wakes without needing you to be perfect. You turn down a quieter lane, cobblestones, uneven buildings, closer together. A cat dozes in a windowsill, eyes half-lidded, soaking up the newborn sun like it owns the hour. You envy that cat. Then, in a strange twist of thought, you thank it for showing you what real repose looks like. You sit on a nearby bench. This lane is one of those odd in-between places, neither fully public nor entirely private. You've passed it 100 times, but never sat here. The wood is rough, the iron sides cold, but the moment is full. You reach into your coat pocket and find a small scrap of paper, the corner of a letter you meant to finish weeks ago. You smooth it out on your knee. There's just one sentence: I can't sleep, but I remember everything. You consider adding more, or tearing it, or folding it back away. Instead, you rest your hand over it and close your eyes, not to sleep, just to pause. You think of all the things you remember during the night: your grandmother's cough syrup made from cloves and honey, the time you stayed up as a child waiting for snow that never fell, that old armchair where your father used to nap mouth, open dreams unbothered. You think of all the things you learned too, that sleep cannot be summoned like a servant, that stillness has a wisdom of its own, that not all rest happens with eyes closed. You open your eyes again. The lane is the same, but the moment feels deeper now, like you've etched something into it just by sitting, breathing, noticing. The bells of the church down the street chime once, 8:30. Time as always moves forward. You rise and keep walking. There's no destination, just movement, gentle and curious. You pass the bookshop, the baker, the little alley where the lamplighter's cart still rests empty, now his work done for another day. And in the quiet of these steps, you begin to rehearse a truth, not for performance, not for anyone else, just for yourself. I can exist without productivity. I can rest without sleep. I can be tired and still be whole. You say it once in your head, then again softer, until it becomes a kind of internal lullaby. You make your way home. The sun is higher now, and with it the city brightens, but you don't feel overwhelmed. You feel prepared, not because you've slept, but because you've stayed. Through the hours, through the unease, through the silence and the ritual, and the steady companionship of your own breath, and that you realize is enough for today. When you return home, it greets you like an old friend, unchanged in appearance, but somehow warmer now. The light has crept deeper into the rooms, stretching across the floorboards like a gentle tide. The shadows that once seemed heavy and stubborn have thinned, softened by the morning sun. You set your coat on the hook by the door and pause there, one hand still on the fabric. Your fingers linger as if your body needs a moment to adjust, moving from the rhythm of the outside world back into the quiet hum of your own space. You move slowly through the familiar landscape, the worn carpet beneath your feet, the curl of steam still rising from the kettle you forgot to empty, the chair by the hearth a little askew from your long night. You straighten it without thinking. You light a small fire, not for warmth, but for the rhythm of it. The snap of kindling, the slow bloom of heat, the smell of wood and ash. It feels like punctuation, a soft, full stop to the night you just carried through.
You boil water again, this time for simple black tea. No herbs, no remedies, just something ordinary, honest, and steady. You watch the water swirl, the leaves darken, the color deepen to that comforting amber that says you're here now. You carry the cup back to your chair and settle in, not as a patient or a seeker, but as a person at peace. You wrap yourself in the shawl once more and rest your feet on the old ottoman, worn into a shape molded by many other tired bodies before yours. The room holds you gently. The house does not ask anything of you. It simply remains. And that today is a gift. As you sip, your mind wanders back, not to the hours of the night, but to the people who once filled similar chairs, who wrote in similar journals, who whispered prayers or poems to ceilings that never answered. You imagine a woman in 1862 sitting in a room not unlike yours. The paper beneath her hand is crisp. Her candle is nearly spent. She writes, "I have not slept again." But the silence feels less cruel tonight. You smile at her across the years. The two of you are strangers, and yet you know her. You've walked the same narrow hallway between rest and wakefulness, and you've both emerged into morning with something unspoken but solid, like an understanding stitched gently into your bones. Historians still debate whether insomnia shaped Victorian society more than it scarred it. Some argue it created a culture of deep introspection of journals and spiritual treatises and invention. Others believe it simply reflected the anxiety of a world transforming too fast. Steam, industry, empire, gaslight. You suspect both are true. And now in your own quiet century, you carry that inheritance not of sleeplessness, but of reflection, of making something meaningful from the hours the world would rather discard. You shift in your seat. The blanket slips from your shoulder. You pull it back slow and unrushed. There's no need to do anything else just yet. You don't need to tidy the desk or wash the cup or organize the day. You can simply sit here and exist. A breeze filters through the open window, lifting the edge of a curtain. The air is crisp and clean now, like a page not yet written on. You breathe it in without effort. The birds outside are louder now, no longer tentative but certain. Their songs layer over each other like conversation, in a language you don't speak, but still somehow understand. And you sitting here in the aftermath of the night feel no urgency to respond. You don't need to move forward. You don't need to mark progress. You don't need to name what you've just experienced. You just need to sit, to listen, to know that you endured something ancient and ordinary and quietly extraordinary. And in doing so, you've made space for a softer kind of strength, the kind that doesn't seek applause, the kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that lets you sip your tea in silence and feel whole. You stay in the chair a while longer, not out of laziness, but from a sense that the moment hasn't finished unfolding yet. The tea grows cooler in your hands. The light shifts again, warmer now, more insistent, casting long, golden lines across the rug. But you remain still. The day is yours now. The city has fully woken. You hear voices in the alleyway, laughter carts rolling past a child chasing something unseen. It's not jarring. It's distant, like music playing in another room. You don't feel the usual pressure that mornings bring. There's no inner voice reminding you to catch up, to make lists, to seize anything. The voice that usually hurries you along has grown quiet. Maybe it's still asleep. Maybe for once it understands. You turn slightly in the chair and glance again at your journal. Pages filled in the small slanted script of a person talking to themselves in the dark.
You flip back rereading bits at random, drank the lettuce water, bitter, oddly grounding. 4 o'clock, still awake, still breathing. I think I'm learning how to sit with the not knowing. You close the journal and slide it into the drawer, not to hide it, but to let it rest. It has served its purpose. Tonight, perhaps it will open again, or maybe not. Maybe this was enough. You move to the window, now drawn not by urgency, but by curiosity. Below, the bakery opens its doors, a flurry of aprons and flour. A man in suspenders balances a tray of hot loaves, steam rising like a blessing. 2 women walk by with linked arms, talking quickly, their steps light and sure. A boy pushes a wheelbarrow with intense concentration, as if the fate of the world depends on his balance. You watch them not as someone left out, but as someone who has already completed something quietly difficult. You kept vigil through the night. You held space for yourself when the world was silent. You gave up the fight against sleep and found rest in its shadow. That's no small thing. You open the window a bit wider. The air carries with it the smell of bread coal and something green, perhaps ivy warmed by sun. You lean into it, letting it fill your lungs. You think back to the books you've read, the history you've studied. Victorian society, so obsessed with appearance, with order, with control. And yet in the private pages of diaries and letters, you always found cracks, moments where the facade slipped and real vulnerability poured through. A mother writing by oil lamp. He will not sleep, and I do not know how to soothe him. A clerk scribbling in the margin of a ledger, up again at 3. Mind racing. I think I am tired of being brave. A governess noting beside a pressed flower, I dream while awake and walk while asleep. No one sees it. Those voices echo now, not as ghosts, but as kin. You're part of that long, unbroken lineage of quiet endurance. You've joined their night watches, shared their small rituals, and now stand with them in the morning light, older in spirit, if not in years. You pour the last of the tea into your cup, lukewarm now, but still soothing. You take it with you to the writing desk where sunlight spills in generous streaks. There's no need to write more. But you leave the pen uncapped just in case. You glance at the clock. Soon you'll have to re-enter the world. Errands, conversation, small tasks that build a life. But you'll carry this stillness with you. This knowledge that you can meet the night and come through it, not unscathed, but untouched, in the places that matter. You take one last sip. Let it sit on your tongue. And you whisper to no one in particular, I was awake, but I was not alone. The tea is gone, the light is full, and your body knows its time. Not time in the demanding sense, the clanging bell, the tapping foot, but time in the gentle seasonal way, like spring following winter, like a sigh following a held breath. You rise from the chair and stretch slowly, arms, heavy fingers, tingling with the slight ache of dawn. Your joints crack in quiet protest, and you smile, not from amusement, but recognition. This body has carried you through another night. It deserves the smile. You move through your morning rituals, now not to perform, but to honor. Folding the blanket, opening the drapes, straightening the rug you kicked askew hours ago in a moment of restless pacing. These aren't chores, they're echoes. Reminders that everything you touched in the night has waited for you to return. With softer hands, you wash your face at the basin. The water is cool, refreshing. You meet your reflection in the mirror eyes, tired, yes, but somehow steadier.
not because you slept, but because you endured.
And endurance has its own kind of radiance. There's a knock at the door. Not literal, just the kind your life taps with. A thought, a plan, a reason to move forward. You don't rush to answer it, you'll get there. But not before a moment more of quiet. You sit again just briefly and take in the room as it is now, sunlit, still, and changed. Not by paint or furniture, but by memory. These walls know something about you they didn't know before. They held your silence. They watched you wrestle with the hours. And now they hold your peace. This is the part of the day Victorians called the settling hour, before the work began, after the body stirred. A time for gentle return, for grounding, for preparation not just of tasks but of self. They believed what you did in this hour shaped the rest of the day. And so you choose stillness. You turn to the journal one last time. Just a phrase, just enough. You write, I did not win the night, but I kept it company. You close the book and leave it on the desk where the light can warm its cover. And now the wind down. Your breath is slower now, your body heavier. There is no urgency, no need to think forward or look back. You've walked through every hour. You've sat with every version of yourself, the restless one, the desperate one, the soft, tired one at the window. The house is quiet now, not because it's empty, but because it's full of rest. The kind of rest that doesn't depend on sleep. The kind that grows from stillness, from patience, from having allowed yourself to feel without fleeing. Outside, the world continues. But inside here, you've paused time, just enough to notice the way the light touches the wall, the way the air settles after movement, the way silence doesn't need to be broken to be understood. Let your shoulders fall. Let your jaw unclench. Let your thoughts drift, not away, but gently to the side. Let the night's questions dissolve into softness. There's no need to solve anything now, no need to prepare. You are already enough just as you are. Let the quiet hold you. Let your breathing carry you. Let yourself be still. Sleep will come, or maybe not. But peace is here now. And that's what matters most.